At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to Louie, a 35-year-old beautiful woman who works at a high-level position at Columbia University. In the next scene, we see her with Peter, her ex-husband. Despite being divorced, they remain good friends. After work, Louie often feels bored and lonely. One day, she calls her friend Jessica, who tells her that her own husband is always busy with work. Jessica even admits that she's starting to think about having an affair. She adds, "I wish I were single like you, Louie. Life would be so much easier." After the call, Louie feels even more alone. The next moment, she receives a letter at work. On the envelope, the name Scott is written. This surprises her because, back in college, Louie had a crush on a man named Scott who had died in a car accident. Curious, Louie opens the letter and calls the number written on it. She tells Scott that he has an interview scheduled for Monday and to bring all his documents. The interview is just an excuse. Louie wants to see this person who shares the name of her college crush. After that, Louie visits her mother's home, where she looks at old gifts from the original Scott and reminisces about the past. On Monday, Louie is waiting for Scott to arrive at the university. He's a little late, so she calls Jessica and talks about the old college Scott, triggering even more memories. Shortly after, Scott arrives and Louie is shocked. He looks exactly like her college crush and even talks the same way. After the interview, Louie offers to show Scott around the university, pretending it's part of the onboarding process. He agrees. Later, Louie brings Scott to her home. She hadn't been physically intimate with anyone in a long time, and Scott also seems to understand her intentions. They drink wine and talk. During the conversation, Scott tells Louie he wants to paint her because she is so beautiful, and begins to touch her gently. Louie loses control and they become intimate. Afterwards, Louie is very happy. After a long time, she has experienced physical and emotional closeness. Her loneliness begins to fade. Scott calls his mother and says his interview went well, and that he's coming home soon. Before leaving, Louie asks him to promise that he'll come back to see her the next day. Scott agrees and goes to take a shower. Later that evening, when Louie returns home from work, she finds her ex-husband Peter at her house. He says he came to talk about ending things for good between them. After their conversation, Peter ends up sleeping at her place. The next day, when Scott arrives, he finds Peter there. Scott becomes angry and suspicious. Peter pretends not to know what's going on. Louie asks Peter to leave. After Peter leaves, Scott confronts Louie, thinking she had spent the night with her ex. Louie tries to explain that nothing happened between them. Scott then asks if she's breaking up with him, and he leaves angrily. Louie goes to meet Jessica and tells her everything. Jessica advises her not to complicate her relationships unnecessarily. Eventually, Louie transforms herself emotionally. She meets with Peter and tells him clearly, "You need to understand, we're not together anymore." In the end, Louie gives Scott his joining letter and he's thrilled. They become closer again, and finally, the film ends with a kiss between Louie and Scott.